G'day reefers, I'm Cam the Fish Guy. Welcome to Fragarama. Today we're going to be talking about different systems to transport your corals to Fragarama. We're going to be looking at 3 different ways that you can transport your corals that are going to minimize the stress to the corals so that your corals have got the best opportunity to open up and look good for the event, showing their best color and remaining healthy without any losses. So the first method that you can use to transport your corals to Fragarama is bagging them up. So let's have a look at how we do that. Bagging your frags for Fragarama is definitely a good option in terms of keeping the corals safe, because typically you'll bag each coral individually. But of course the problem with that is it does mean you need bags and rubber bands, but also it is quite a labor intensive thing to do. And we have in the past bagged up our corals for reef stocks, but when you've got literally hundreds of corals, it takes ages to do it this way. If you've got smaller numbers, then it's not so bad. The frag racks at Fragarama hold over 100 frags. So it's the sort of thing that you could do in a couple of hours, bag up 100 corals. And to do that, we normally use small bags, like what we'd call a frag bag. And you basically just fill it with a small amount of water, and you get your coral. This is a little people eater, zoa, drop it in, and then when you tie it up, you just try and capture a fair bit of air in the bag so that the water stays oxygenated for the period of transportation. Put a rubber band around the top. It does take a little bit of practice, and tie it up. So you want to transport your bagged up corals in something like an esky, and bearing in mind that it does take up a fair bit of space, and this esky would probably only take maybe 20 or 30. You can bag them with less air depending on how far you're going, but these are the considerations. The other handy thing about an esky is that they are pretty easy to move around, especially when they're on wheels. The second system that you can use for transporting corals to Fragarama also involves the esky, but a bit of egg crate, and I'll show you how we do that. So the idea is that you cut a piece of egg crate to suit your esky, and you want to find a way to prop the egg crate up so that the stems of the plugs are going to be able to protrude through, and the corals will sit in place nicely. And there's a variety of ways you can do it. You can use PVC to prop it up. With this one, or this esky anyway, I actually just put it on an angle like this, and it sits in a position where it's on an angle. However, the corals sit quite nicely on it, and it works well. You then fill your esky with water out of your system, and the idea is that you're using water out of the aquarium that the corals are in, and we do this because we want to minimize the shock to the system of the corals, and by using water which is exactly the same, the corals transport a lot better. Okay. So now we have our esky full enough that the egg crate is fully underwater. We just get our frags and put them in. And once we've got all our frags in, we put the lid on and we go to our frag show. So now we have our frags in the esky, we just have to go to the frag show and put them into our frag tank. So we have conveniently located our frag tank just here, and we can then just take our corals out. I normally leave the frag rack under the water and transport and move them into your frag rack. Now, because with this system and with bagging them, it does double handle the corals. You do find that it'll take them a little while to get used to the new tank and open up and look their best, but this is why we do recommend to bring your corals the day before the event. However, there is another system that you can use to get your corals to Fragarama, which is even more convenient and even less stressful to the corals. So let's check that out. So we need to start by talking about the frag racks. Now, this frag rack is one of our prototypes and it has the Galleria Aquatica logo on the bottom. The frag racks that we'll be using at Fragarama won't have the Galleria Aquatica logo. Instead, they'll have the Fragarama logo. They're also going to have more holes than this one. They're going to have, I think it's 120 frag holes, but there is the option for having a frag rack like this in terms of the silicone inserts. Now, the idea of the silicone inserts is that your corals, when you put them in with a plug, they sit in place and it's actually quite secure. And the idea of this system is it means that you can actually take this frag rack home or to your shop or wherever your corals are located, and you can populate your corals onto the frag rack so that when you transport them to Fragarama, they're secure in their position, and so they are less likely to fall, knock into each other or become damaged. Now, we have one of these frag racks which we've populated, and we'll show you what we do to transport it to Fragarama. We have our frag rack in the tank, and this is one of our main frag tanks that we use here. And the advantage of this frag tank is that it's nice and open, and it is quite easy for us to fit frag racks like this one in the tank. Now, depending on the size of your tanks, you might not be able to do this. These frag racks are quite large, but in this case it works perfectly. And what we're going to do is we're going to transport our frag rack in this container. Now, I'm going to start filling it. It's important, of course, that we fill it above the level of the tallest frag, which in this case is a Montipora digitata. But I do like to fill it relatively shallow so that you get minimal splash over the sides. This container was purchased at Bunnings. It was about $30. It is a particularly wide container, and it will do the job nicely for the purpose of getting our frag rack to Fragarama. So I'll just fill it now. I'll just give it a sec. So I think it's almost full enough. I'll put our frag rack in and I can always top it up if I need. So our frag rack. So you can see we've pre-populated this, and because of the silicone inserts, the corals really don't move around. So it's a very safe way to transport your corals. I put the whole thing in, and we do need a little bit more water. So I'll keep filling. So now we've got our corals fully covered with water. I always use a trolley. This is probably a two-person lift. It's probably about maybe, I don't know, 20 kilos. I wouldn't have put nearly as much water in were it not for the digitata. We'll put it on our trolley, put the lid on. Okay, and now to our frag event. Something to bear in mind with this type of container is that they're not very waterproof, and when it's in a car it's going to slosh backwards and forwards, which is okay for the corals because they're secured within the silicone inserts, but if you have this in the car on a back seat, it's going to slosh over the side. So I'd probably wrap it in a garbage bag or something, or better yet, put it on the back of a ute, something you can hose down afterwards. But the big advantage of this system is what I'm about to show you. We get to the frag event, and all we do, we pick up our whole rack like this. Again, the corals are nice and secure, and we put the whole rack in place. And this is the big advantage of this system. Whilst everyone else is unbagging their corals, picking them out of their buckets, putting them in, you've just dropped your entire rack of corals all ready to go with the prizes. Everything that you've spent the last week or so preparing for the show goes in one go. It's an excellent system. So we're more than happy to help with vendors if you've got any questions as to the whole process with Fragarama, but I would recommend that this is a great way for certain vendors to get their corals to Fragarama. It's not going to work for everyone. You do need to ensure that you've got a large enough container that the frag rack fits in. You need to have a frag tank that's large enough for the frag rack to sit in as well whilst you populate all the corals. But for certain people who are able to drive to the event, so the locals really, this is an excellent option and probably the way that I would recommend. Now, if you do want to do this system with the silicone inserts, you need to contact the committee at Fragarama. So you can do that through Facebook or contact us with an email. All the details are on our website, and we'd certainly love to hear from you and help you have the best experience possible at Fragarama. But that's it for today's episode on transporting your corals to Fragarama. I hope you've learned a little something and you've got some ideas in mind for the way that you can do it to make it a pain-free experience. Thanks for watching. I'm Cam the Fish Guy. Happy reefing.